Today, we are diving deep into a concept that is, quite literally, the secret engine behind modern business: economies of scale. It's this invisible force that lets huge companies get so big and stay on top. It's why, in business, size really matters.
You've seen this, right? You walk into a giant chain store and a product is way cheaper than it is at the small shop down the street. How on earth do they do that? Well, it's not just about flexing their muscles in the market. It's actually about a powerful economic principle we're going to break down right now.
And here's the answer right up front: economies of scale. The idea is actually pretty simple. The more of something you make, the cheaper it becomes to produce each individual one. Think about it. You're spreading all your big costs over a massive number of goods, and that ability turns high volume into a nearly unbeatable competitive weapon.
So to really get this, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the core advantages of getting bigger. Then, we're going to put on our consultant hats and use a framework to look at the two distinct types of scale. After that, we'll talk about the surprising point where getting bigger actually starts to hurt you. And finally, we'll bring it all back to the real world with examples you see every day.
All right, let's jump into part one, the scale advantage. This is where we unpack exactly how growing in size translates directly into paying less to make every single product you sell.
So what's the secret sauce here? Well, it's a mix of a few really powerful things. First, you get huge operational advantages. Think about an assembly line. Instead of one person trying to do 10 different jobs, you have 10 people who become absolute masters at just one job. The result? Things get done way faster and with better quality. Now pair that with big automated tech that can run 24/7. Then you've got purchasing power. If you're buying 1,000,000 screws instead of 1,000, you better believe you're getting a better price. And finally, you get to spread all your overhead costs, the IT department, HR, marketing, across millions of items, which makes the cost on any single item practically disappear.
Okay, so we just looked at a bunch of drivers, but they all really boil down to three core pillars of advantage. You've got operational efficiency, you've got purchasing power, and you've got spreading your overhead. And here's the key insight from a strategic point of view. These three things don't just add up, they multiply. They create this powerful, self-reinforcing cycle of growth and profit. If you master these three, you can build a business that is just incredibly tough to compete against.
Okay, now we get why scale is so powerful. So let's get a little more structured about it. Like a consultant would, we're going to use a framework to split these benefits into two distinct types. This is super helpful because it shows us that not all economies of scale are created in the same way.
So here's our framework, broken down into two clean categories. On one side, you have internal economies. These are the advantages a company creates for itself. They're the result of smart decisions made by management. On the other side, you have external economies. These are advantages that lift up an entire industry, usually because of outside factors like where they're located or government policies.
Let's dive a little deeper on those internal levers a company can pull. First up, technical scale. That's investing in bigger, faster machines. Second is purchasing, the classic buy in bulk discount. Third is managerial. This is about hiring specialists, like a supply chain wizard, whose expertise makes everything more efficient. Fourth, financial scale. If you're a big, stable company, banks see you as a safer bet, so you get loans with better rates. Fifth, marketing. You can run one Super Bowl ad that reaches millions, making the cost to reach each person tiny. And finally, risk-bearing. A big company can launch a new product in 10 different countries. If it fails in a couple, no big deal. For a small business, one failed launch could be the end of the road.
All right, let's flip to the other side of our framework: external economics of scale. This is where it's not just about one company. This is where the whole industry gets a boost, where a rising tide really does lift all the boats.
So what creates these industry-wide advantages? The classic example is Silicon Valley. You have so many tech companies in one place that it's created this incredible pool of skilled engineers. That makes it easier for every tech company there to hire great people. Another big one is government support, like tax breaks for clean energy companies. You also see competitors teaming up on basic research or sharing infrastructure, like a specialized port that helps everyone in the area.
So, based on everything we've said, the goal is just to get as big as humanly possible, right? Well, not so fast. In this next section, we're going to explore the other side of the coin, the point where growth can actually start working against you.
And this brings us to a really key paradox. If you're not careful, chasing scale with everything you've got can lead you right into its evil twin: diseconomies of scale. This is that critical tipping point where, as you produce more, your average cost for each item actually starts to go up.
Let's go back to our restaurant kitchen for a second.
Imagine you've got 2 cooks, and they're working together perfectly. Add a third cook, and maybe things get even faster. But what happens if you try to cram 10 more cooks in there? It's going to be chaos, right? They're bumping into each other, yelling orders, getting in the way, and the whole operation just grinds to a halt. That, in a nutshell, is a diseconomy of scale. More inputs, less output.
The key insight here is that this isn't some law of physics. It's often a failure of management. Internally, you get problems like having so many layers of managers that decisions take forever, or communication just completely breaks down across a giant global company. But external stuff can cause it too, like when it gets way more complex and expensive to ship your products to more and more remote places.
For a long time, economists saw this as a classic U-shaped curve. As you grow, your costs per item fall, you hit a sweet spot, and then boom, they start to rise again. Getting too big was a fundamental risk. But today, the game is changing. Thanks to technology and new strategies, smart companies are figuring out how to flatten that curve, letting them get bigger than ever before without losing their edge.
So how are they doing it? Well, flexible technology is a huge one. Things like 3D printing make it cheap to produce small, custom batches of things. Outsourcing is another total game changer. Now even a tiny startup can get access to the same world-class IT services that used to be only for the giants. We're also seeing the rise of things like micro-manufacturing and incredibly efficient global supply chains that make the size of any one factory less important than the intelligence of the whole network.
Okay, we've covered a ton of theory, but now let's bring it all home. In our last section, we'll see how these principles of scale aren't just for MBA textbooks. They are at work all around us every single day.
Let's go back to our restaurant kitchen one last time, but let's make it a success story. A new cook joins the team. A smart manager knows about specialization, so they put that cook on one station, let's say desserts. By doing it over and over and over, that cook becomes an absolute dessert-making machine. Now, just imagine that same level of mastery at every single station in the kitchen. That's how a busy restaurant can serve hundreds of perfect meals in one night. It's a beautiful, real-world example of scale in action.
And this just shows how the exact same principle works in 2 totally different businesses. For a shop that makes custom t-shirts, the big cost is the initial design and setup. But once that's done, printing one more shirt is super cheap. The more they print, the lower the cost per shirt. Now, look at a giant car factory. The initial investment in robots and tooling is astronomical. But once it's up and running, they spread that huge cost over millions of cars, making the cost per car surprisingly low. It's the same idea, just at a different scale. Spread your fixed costs wide.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's this. Achieving economies of scale gives a business a massive cost advantage, and they can do one of 2 things with it. They can either keep it as higher profit margins, or they can pass those savings on to us, the consumers, in the form of lower prices. And of course, lower prices usually lead to more customers, which means more production, which means even greater scale. It's this virtuous cycle that can be incredibly hard for smaller competitors to break into. So, we've just handed you a powerful framework for understanding one of the most fundamental concepts in all of business. You now have the tools to look at any company, from your local coffee shop to a global tech giant, and really understand the engine driving its success. So the question is, what business will you analyze first? The framework is yours. Go use it.